Hello and welcome. My name is Joe Robertson, and I'm your host for Brass Tacks, Talking Cybersecurity, brought to you by Fortinet. The expression getting down to brass tacks means getting to the core of a subject, talking about the important points. And the subject of our brass tacks is cybersecurity, and more specifically, its business implications. So this podcast is aimed at business executives and board members whose role could be impacted by cyber attacks, which, when you get down to it, really means just about everybody. As for me, I'm an executive consultant helping top managers navigate the intersection between business needs and security requirements. For Brass Tacks, I will be talking with cybersecurity experts from many different companies about the business implications of cybersecurity. For each episode, we will focus on one theme with one expert. Today's theme is Cyber Risk Has Become Business Risk. To discuss this, I've invited Alain Sanchez, EMEA Chief Information Security Officer at Fortinet. Alain, welcome to Brass Tacks. Let's talk cybersecurity.
Pleased to be here, Joe, with you.
Okay, I'm going to start by saying cyber risk is business risk. And I think this is a great statement to start with because I think it summarizes everything that's at stake. Until everything became computerized, there was no such thing as cyber risk. There's no cyber, right? But now anything that threatens a company or an organization's IT threatens the entire business. So someone who has a fiduciary responsibility, an executive, a management responsibility needs to evaluate risks and needs to act on cyber risks. So from your point of view, what should they be doing?
The first thing, which sounds easy and is not, is to really understand the priorities inside the value chain of things that needs to be secured. The second thing is you have to be cognizant of a compliance framework that is getting more sophisticated, more demanding every day for the good. However, that's still a dimension that needs to be integrated. We could summarize that. No cyber, no business today.
So you're saying that you first need to understand what's in your own organization and what needs to be protected, and then look outside and see how outside forces are going to have an impact on that. Both those who are attacking, but also the regulators who are going to be who are already, not just going to be, they're already putting in place regulations that companies have to comply with. Can you talk about a few of those?
Let's take one example. One is DORA, means Digital Operations Resilience Act.
And that's a European Union act.
It is, and it's directed more to the banking and financial system. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is this R that has been kind of appropriated by the legal bodies. In the past, resilience was more of a technical concept.
Sure, make sure that you can bring your servers back up if they go down.
And now that resilience has been defined by the regulator in its own point of view. And we need to be cognizant of this angle as much as we need to be able to show that we have resilience plans far ahead of any potential attack.
So that's why, from an top executive point of view, this resilience concept becomes important because it's not about turning on equipment. It's about how will the business respond to some kind of a disaster, whether it's a physical, a natural disaster, or a cyber disaster.
How does a critical infrastructure recovers from an attack? And what are those components that needs to be restored primarily? Just take the banking system. Just take the energy system. Just think of the health care system. Not an easy task to decide how you are going to recover, what do you want to recover first, and what is the roadmap of recovery that fits the requirements of a legal law requirement and body.
If I'm on a board of directors, I don't know how to do that, or if I don't know pieces of it, that's certainly not why I'm on the board. What should companies be doing to make sure that that happens?
Create a CISO job.
A CISO. Okay, tell us about the CISO. What's that?
It stands for Chief Information Security Officer. It is someone that is in between the business in all its dimensions, sales, marketing, legal, finance, you name them, and the reality of the information systems that underpin the possibility of the realization of all these objectives. So it's a super legal cognizant translator of the business requirements into cybersecurity requirements. So you see the complexity of a job. Needs to talk all the languages. CMO language is not the same, that CFO language is not the same, that CEO, just to name a few of these major 500 pounds gorilla sitting in the board, and the complexity of an information system that now not only includes the typical network infrastructure, but also the operational technology, which is a whole new domains that the CISO needs to be cognizant of.
So that's the production environment that for forever has had, in most cases, industrial control systems that have been separate from the IT environment, and where the concern has always been, how do I get more productivity? How do I make more products for lower amounts of input and faster, et cetera?
Exactly.
And now that's under attack as well?
Absolutely. Because it was not designed for security. It was designed for speed, reliability, efficiency, and it was air-gapped. Nothing was connected to these beautiful toys. The way you used to build a car was something intrinsically happening in the car manufacturing department. The way you refined oil was happening in a column, literally.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, someone comes in with the reputation of this IP open bar and has the mandate to connect that beautiful plan that has been working for 40 years very well, thank you, to these new toys in the IP department. So it was also a human kind of revolution between someone that will be called a CISO, because it could not be a typical CTO. It could not be a typical CIO. It had to be someone that understands the cyber dimension of things that were never designed to have cybersecurity into them. So not an easy task, not an easy human task, not an easy technological task, not an easy diplomatic task, and certainly not an easy legal obligation-orientated task.
That's interesting the way you say that, because if I'm a board member or a CEO or a top executive, cybersecurity in the past was not something I thought very much about. It was something we had techs who would put antivirus on the computers and things like that. And in the last 5, maybe 10 years, I've started as an executive hearing news stories about companies that get attacked. Okay, and what you're saying to me is that at that board level, they need to have a translator who understands their business and also understands the technology, not just the techie, and that's this CISO. So what are some of the functions that CISO should be providing to the board of directors?
A knowledge of where the cherished capital value chain is vulnerable.
So where the crown jewels are, what IT systems have proprietary information and
exactly
customer data.
And the wake-up call, unfortunately, was the incident. There was a moment, the era of cybersecurity being a necessary evil. And then there was another, which is happening now, by the way, where it becomes a business enabler. And in between those two extremes of the spectrum is the reality of cybersecurity today. So you still find companies that are not cognizant they have been attacked, some for years, without just realizing that their industrial secret, their intellectual properties were just so available to someone else. So phase one. And there are those who have been traumatized by enormous amount of money they had to pay to the regulatory. And that all of a sudden brought security on the table in a panic mode. And between these two, you have this new generation of CISOs that are considered as business enablers. Typically, the analogy of a Formula One whose winning trajectory is also based on a superior braking system applies in cybersecurity.
So wait, you're talking about a Formula One car. It's designed to go fast. Okay, that's the engine. Why the brakes?
Well, the deceleration on a Formula One is far more important than the acceleration. However, this one is enormous. So the way you can brake generally makes you win. And the way you can protect yourself and manage the cyber risks makes you win on a competitive chessboard. Because you can dare a full interaction between your vendors, your customers, and the production line. You can dare to have something as complex as a car manufacturing plant directly related to the orders of the colors somewhere in the dealership.
So having good braking, having good security lets you go faster.
Exactly. And lets you design, this is perhaps the most interesting thing, enables you to design services and products that are even closer to a moving market demand, because you can allow the input from the field in a more transparent and fast manner. If that data that you collect, process, and turn into decision is safely stored and processed and turned into action.
That's interesting, because that brings up what I think are some other interesting aspects of that CISO's role, in that he isn't there just to tell the board of directors, here's how we need to comply. It's to try to create an environment of cybersecurity throughout the company too, isn't it? Including, even as you were saying, the developers of the systems need to be informed of how to build security in from the very beginning of their development, don't they?
I would go even further than that. They not only need to be informed, they need to be agents of this security. In the way you would develop a line of code, think security at the same time as you think application. Oh, I'm going to query this database. The way I query that database needs to carry sufficient ability to protect the data and to report on the data, as much as the sophistication of the query. So it's not a cybersecurity that just transcends all the departments of the company. It's a cybersecurity that is embedded into every single person in the company. People would see that they have more eyes than any CISO department could have, because they live the threat, the risk, the innovation, the interactivity on a daily basis. So if they turn that knowledge into something that flows naturally to the CISO office, and if the CISO office is smart enough to make these people ambassadors of its own mission, then we are creating this cyber culture spirit that enables us to have, by design, safe and innovative and bold solutions.
So idea of having your staff as your first line of cyber defense is a great one, because a lot of people look at the staff as the weak link. Okay, they're letting in, they're answering emails from Nigerian princes and things like that. If I'm a member of the board of directors and I am looking to secure the company more, you're saying we need to have CISOs in place, or someone who's got a role similar to that, a compliance officer. I've seen people who are performing this function. Some of them report into IT, some report into finance, some report into the risk management organization. These are all appropriate places, but where I've seen problems is when they don't have direct connectivity to the board. They're not reporting directly to the board, or at least not providing reports to the board of directors and to the top executives. They've got several layers of management between them. What do you see in improving this situation?
I think it's a matter of understanding how important the voice of security needs to be in a company. If you veto the voice of security with some very valid financial argument, you got the Titanic. We don't need as much as security boats, because actually the upper deck is not as comfortable if you have all these little boats on it. And it's a very valid argument from a customer orientation point of view, except it has killed 1,500 people one day.
If the ship of your company is heading towards an iceberg, you need to listen to the people who are telling you that you're heading towards an iceberg, even if you don't want to hear it.
And in the design of the boat, you need to listen to them as much as when the iceberg is in view.
Okay, so what kinds of information should that officer who's dealing with security, CISO or whatever the title is, what should he be providing to the captain of the Titanic? What should he be saying?
A deep understanding of the value chain turned into risk. Obviously, the CEO knows the value chain of the company, but how does that translate into risk? Because what you do when you sit at a board is only one thing. You take decision based on risk scenarios. You have scenario 1, investment 1, risk 1, benefit 1. 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. You look at them and say, I can afford that, I cannot afford that, and you take the decision. Now, when these scenarios of risk are clear enough and expressed in a non-technical jargon so that it becomes understandable by members of the boards that have zillions of different things to do than taking care about the IT infrastructure, then you're doing a great job as a CISO. You're a super translator, a medium between the business and the technology.
You know, one of the things that concerns me, though, is I have seen CISOs who report to the board on a regular basis, some who actually are members of the board of directors, but an awful lot have these responsibilities, and yet they're 2 or 3 layers of organization removed. Okay, you've probably been seeing the same thing. What are we to do about this? How can companies become more aware of the critical nature of security as a business impact factor?
Unfortunately, is the big incidents that is the wake-up call. And when this happens and you find your customers' credit card credentials out there available in the darknet, all of a sudden your own iPad is encrypted and you can't access to it, then you realize, oh, maybe that's because the voice hasn't been heard enough. There's many incident analysis that in fact reveal that the information was all there, that, yeah, we just hide this bunch of beautiful new sensors or cameras, and because we had to deploy them very fast, we've been just keeping the factory passwords by default because it was just faster to deploy, and then we could meet the deadline.
And then an attacker knows what your password is and does bad stuff.
Exactly.
Okay. So are there any other things that you think that CISOs should be doing to inform their boards of directors. So one of the things that I see a lot is executives who say, how come the security people keep asking me for more money and they want to buy more stuff?
There's a big difference in a board saying, I need 1 million, or I'm going to avoid you to lose 10 or 100. Now, in order to articulate that with documented evidence that you are actually at risk to lose 100, is something that enables the CISO to be a serious member, a real member of the board, not someone that we just invite to do a few presentations about how good we're doing and then moves away. It has to be part of any design process, new ways of doing business that happens in the company. Otherwise, when you first design and then secure, too late. You've been attacked, whether you know it or not.
So boards and executives that don't have security and cybersecurity specifically as one of the important areas that they look at on a regular basis are flying blind. They are not aware of the danger that's coming up.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Alain Sanchez. This has been very interesting. I think that's an excellent way to finish our conversation. That's it for today's Brass Tacks, Talking Cybersecurity, brought to you by Fortinet. I hope you found it useful and maybe even interesting. This series is available both as an audio and a video podcast. You will find it on your regular podcast app or YouTube, as well as on Fortinet TV.